Most people moving through their daily routines have no idea how profoundly their world has shifted beneath them. It's not because they're unaware or indifferent. It's because the changes are buried so deeply under polished headlines, carefully rehearsed statements, and institutions determined to project stability at all costs. For years, the nation's surface has looked calm, almost deceptively so, as if every rough edge has been sanded down to preserve the illusion of control. But beneath that veneer lies a growing web of failures, compromises, secret deals, and improvised fixes that no one is willing to acknowledge publicly. Every once in a while, however, a story manages to slip through the cracks. Some odd occurrence, unexplained glitch, or report no agency wants to own, and for a brief moment, the curtain pulls back just enough for people to wonder if something bigger is happening. Those flashes are always pushed aside quickly, smoothed over, or drowned in distraction. Yet the truth is still there, expanding quietly in every direction. What the public sees is only the sanitized surface. What's actually unfolding is far more complex, far more coordinated, and far more dangerous than anyone realizes. Across the country, whispers have been spreading. Whispers of a sprawling operation that no one officially admits exists. It's described as a massive internal program, one that began with good intentions but spiraled far beyond anything its creators imagined. In the early days, it was supposed to be a temporary fix, a safety net to stabilize fractured systems and prevent national infrastructure from buckling under pressure. But the people operating it quickly discovered that temporary solutions are only temporary if someone forces them to stop. Instead, the program grew, absorbing new departments, budgets, personnel, and territories until it became a shadow system running parallel to the legitimate one. Official reports mention none of this. Public statements deny everything. Yet those closest to the operation know that its scale now rivals that of the traditional agencies it was meant to support. Supplies are rerouted, staff are reassigned, critical resources are quietly diverted without explanation. And when someone asks too many questions, they are told it's above their clearance or not their concern. The public remains unaware of how deeply this machinery has embedded itself into their lives because nothing about it was ever designed to be visible. The secrecy surrounding the program is so dense that even many people working inside government buildings have no idea what they're actually part of. They receive instructions without origins, shipments without labels, and protocols with no documented history. Entire divisions operate on unwritten rules passed verbally, as if someone fears that putting any of it on paper would expose just how far outside official oversight the operation has drifted. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens notice odd patterns, certain neighborhoods getting quietly sealed off at night, unusual convoys moving through industrial corridors, small towns suddenly experiencing unexplained power fluctuations. None of these signs are dramatic enough to spark panic individually, but together they form a puzzle that should have everyone asking uncomfortable questions. Yet they don't. People assume the system is functioning as intended, unaware that many of the decisions affecting their lives are being made in rooms they never knew existed. And the few insiders who grasp the full picture understand why this secrecy must be maintained if the truth were ever revealed. If people realized how much of their society has been quietly redirected behind their backs, it wouldn't just cause outrage, it would cause collapse. People often assume that if something catastrophic were happening behind the scenes, someone, anyone, would sound the alarm loudly enough to break through the noise. But the truth is far more unsettling. Warnings are being issued, only they're buried so deeply within bureaucratic channels that by the time they surface, the consequences have already begun unfolding. In the underground data halls of the Central Oversight Bureau, analysts whisper about anomalies that don't match any known pattern. Encryption layers appear without authors. Resource allocations vanish from the logs without audit trails. And most disturbingly, a pattern of coordinated movement across the nation's unseen logistics network reveals a power operating parallel to the government, yet pretending not to exist. These aren't wild theories, and they're not the product of fringe speculation. They're the byproduct of a system whose internal gears have started grinding against each other. But because the public sees only polished press conferences and neatly structured announcements, they remain oblivious. They don't see the frantic midnight briefings, the restricted memos, the nervous glances exchanged by those sworn to maintain order. They don't realize that every institution is already straining under the weight of something it can't identify, let alone control. Behind closed doors, a small group of senior officials has begun meeting in secure rooms far from the public's eye. Every session starts the same way. Lights dimmed, devices sealed, conversations limited to analog notes that are burned afterward. The agenda never appears on record, and attendance is confined strictly to those with the highest clearance levels. Inside these heavily shielded chambers, The tone is starkly different from the confident messaging broadcast to the population. They talk about the drift, a term coined to describe the spreading gaps between the country's operational systems and the people responsible for running them. The drift isn't a single event or a crisis with a clear starting point. It's a slow, creeping divergence where infrastructure behaves unpredictably, networks reroute themselves without human input, and regional administrators report decisions they never made appearing in official logs. No one dares admit it openly, but the implication is chilling. Something or someone is modifying the system from within. Yet every attempt to investigate leads back to dead-end IP routes, corrupted files, or entire nodes wiped clean. The senior officials don't argue anymore. They don't theorize. They only prepare, aware that the unknown force is accelerating, while the public remains blissfully unaware. Meanwhile, in the outskirts of the capital, a lone investigative archivist named Mara Kessel uncovers a chain of discrepancies that defy every procedure she has trusted for decades. Mara isn't a whistleblower, nor is she someone seeking recognition. She's a meticulous cataloger, someone who notices when file numbers jump out of sequence or when signatures don't quite match. Over the past month, she has identified dozens of authorized directives signed by individuals who were either off-duty, out of state, or officially retired. Even more unsettling is that these directives overlap across departments that traditionally never interact. On a hunch, she overlays the timestamps onto a regional activity grid and realizes they form a synchronized pattern, one too precise to be coincidental. But when she attempts to access cross-department archives to dig deeper, she is abruptly locked out of every system she has used for years. The automated message claims her credentials have been suspended, yet an hour later she receives a printed envelope warning her to cease all unauthorized inquiries. The letter is unsigned, untraceable, and printed on paper stock no longer in circulation. Mara understands in that moment that she has stumbled into something far beyond administrative error. Something orchestrated, concealed, and dangerously intentional. Mara's instincts tell her to walk away, to pretend she never noticed the pattern, but the warning only sharpens her suspicion. She visits an old contact, an encryption expert named Jalen Rourke, who once designed authentication frameworks for several federal agencies before abruptly resigning under undisclosed circumstances. Jalen lives off-grid now, tucked inside a cluttered workshop overflowing with outdated servers and dismantled security rigs. When Mara shows him the directives and timestamps, he scans them silently, his expression tightening with each passing second. Finally, he mutters that the encryption signatures are ghost-layered, a technique he never released publicly, one capable of masking an operator's identity behind a false administrative trail. According to Jalen, only a handful of prototypes were ever created, and all were supposedly destroyed. Yet here they are, active again. The realization hits both of them. Someone with deep institutional access is using classified tools to execute coordinated commands across multiple agencies. If exposed, it would imply the existence of a shadow network acting without oversight. Mara asks who could be behind it. His voice echoes when he speaks, calm and disturbingly familiar with her name. He claims to represent a faction within the government, one that has been monitoring the drift long before she discovered its symptoms. They're not aligned with the officials she trusts, nor with the unseen force manipulating the system. There's something else entirely, a third presence working silently to counterbalance both sides. And according to him, Mara's discovery has placed her at the center of the conflict. The man introduces himself only as Rowan, offering no rank, no agency, no credentials. Yet he speaks with the certainty of someone accustomed to giving briefings behind sealed doors. Rowan explains that the drift is not merely a malfunctioning system. It's a takeover in slow motion, engineered by an embedded faction that has spent years integrating itself into the nation's infrastructure. Their goal isn't to seize public power, at least not initially, but to control the mechanisms that make society function: traffic grids, medical supply allocations, communication relays, financial routing channels. By controlling the invisible arteries of the country, they can manipulate outcomes without ever appearing on a ballot. Mara listens, torn between disbelief and the evidence she has already seen. Rowan insists his group has been pushing back, quietly redirecting corrupted commands and isolating infected nodes. But the opposing faction is evolving, learning, growing bolder. He hands her a data plate containing logs that confirm everything he's saying, patterns identical to the ones Mara uncovered, only on a much larger scale. The files show systemic tampering stretching back years. Mara knows that possessing these logs alone makes her a target, yet she also knows she can't unlearn what she's seen. Rowan warns her, once she steps into this world, there's no going back. Mara asks why she was chosen, a mid-level archivist who never sought attention, someone whose entire career revolved around accuracy and structure. Rowan answers without hesitation, because she sees what others miss. Her meticulous nature makes her uniquely equipped to track inconsistencies that advanced algorithms dismiss as noise. Jalen's ghost-layered signatures weren't meant to be noticed, yet she recognized the pattern. Her instinct to cross-reference timestamps was a step most analysts wouldn't take, and her refusal to ignore what she found made her dangerous to the faction manipulating the system. Rowan believes that with guidance, she could help expose the drift from the inside. But he also warns her that involvement will require absolute secrecy, even from Jalen. Mara hesitates, knowing that accepting Rowan's offer means stepping into a war fought through networks and covert channels, a conflict where enemies hide behind legitimate credentials. Rowan gives her until dawn to decide. If she accepts, someone will contact her. If she refuses, her memory will be scrubbed from every relevant archive, and she will return to her life, protected but powerless. As Rowan fades into the shadows of the abandoned structure, Mara realizes that her quiet, predictable world has already vanished. She is standing at a crossroads she never asked for. Driving home, Mara's mind races through every detail she's learned. The empty roads feel unnatural, as if the city itself is holding its breath. When she reaches her neighborhood, she notices a faint humming beneath the pavement, subtle, rhythmic, too controlled to be environmental noise. She kneels and realizes it's a relay node transmitting signals through her block, likely monitoring movement. She wonders how long it has been there and whether it activated only after her encounter with Rowan. Inside her house, the acoustic dampener is gone. Her computer powers on without issue. Her phone shows normal service. The intruder's traces have been erased, replaced with a pristine simulation of normalcy. But Mara no longer trusts anything that appears untouched. She opens the data plate Rowan gave her, scanning through logs showing how directives were manipulated to guide emergency resources away from certain regions, reroute cargo shipments, and alter digital maintenance schedules. These weren't random disruptions. They were stress tests, probing how far the system could be pushed before humans noticed. Mara closes the data plate, her pulse unsteady. Rowan promised someone would contact her by dawn if she chose to step into the conflict. But as the first hint of sunrise glows at the horizon, she realizes something chilling. The choice may no longer be hers. At precisely 6:03 a.m., Mara's power flickers. Not off, just a fractional dip, so subtle the lights dim for less than a second. But she knows enough now to recognize intention behind small disruptions. Seconds later, her television powers on by itself. Switching to a black screen, displaying a single line of text, "Stand by for secure transmission." Mara freezes. This isn't Rowan's faction. Their communication methods were analog, covert, human. This message comes from inside the system, someone using the infrastructure itself to reach her. The screen shifts to a cascading waveform, then stabilizes. A distorted voice speaks, modulated beyond recognition. It tells her that Rowan lied, that his faction isn't protecting the system, but attempting to seize control of it. According to the voice, Rowan's group intentionally manipulates data to discredit their rivals and justify their own consolidation of authority. The voice claims Rowan chose her not because she's gifted, but because she's expendable, someone who can be blamed if the situation collapses. Mara doesn't know whether to believe it, but the tone carries a strange undertone, desperation. Before she can respond, her television cuts to static, a soft crackle echoing through her living room. The message ends abruptly, leaving her alone with doubts spiraling in every direction, unsure who to trust. Mara contacts Jalen using a secure offline method she learned years ago. They meet at an abandoned rail yard outside the city, far from digital surveillance. Jalen listens to everything. The logs Rowan gave her, the midnight meeting, the morning transmission. His brow knits tighter with each detail. After a long silence, he reveals something he never told her. When he left his federal position, it wasn't voluntary. He discovered discrepancies, similar to hers but far more severe. When he tried to report them, he was silenced. Not by threats, but by fabricated disciplinary reports he never received copies of. His access was revoked, and he was quietly pushed out. The ghost-layered encryption wasn't his invention alone. It was part of a multi-department contract he abandoned when he realized someone was using it to overwrite official records. Hearing this, Mara feels the ground shifting beneath her. If Jalen's tech was weaponized years ago, then the drift has roots deeper than either Rowan or the distorted voice suggested. Jalen warns her that both sides may have reasons to manipulate her, and neither faction may be innocent. They agree on one point: the only truth worth trusting is the one they uncover themselves. Before they leave the rail yard, Mara notices movement near the rusted freight containers. Subtle shapes slipping between shadows. Jalen spots it too and motions her to stay low. A faint mechanical whir fills the air, followed by the glint of something metallic hovering above the tracks. It's a drone, but not one used by law enforcement or infrastructure crews. This model is sleeker, silent, built for reconnaissance. More unsettling is that it isn't watching them directly, it's scanning the ground where their footprints were seconds earlier, analyzing patterns, tracking their movement backward. Mara's pulse quickens as she realizes what that means. Whichever faction deployed the drone already knew they would meet here, or predicted it with enough certainty to justify surveillance. The drone's lens rotates toward them, and Jalen grabs her arm, pulling her behind a derelict carriage. They sprint across the yard, weaving between piles of scrap metal until they reach the service tunnel leading beneath the tracks. Only when the drone's hum fades does Mara stop to breathe. In the dark tunnel, illuminated only by Jalen's dim flashlight, she confronts a brutal truth. She's no longer an observer or a curious archivist. She's a variable in a conflict governed by algorithms, factions, and forces far beyond her reach. Deep inside the service tunnel, Jalen leads Mara toward a maintenance hatch that opens into the sub-basement of an old municipal archive facility. One of the few places left untouched by system-wide integration. The air smells of dust and oxidized metal, a stark contrast to the sterilized precision of the digital world above. Here, analog records still exist. Paper logs, physical maps, handwritten inventories. Jalen believes this is where they'll find traces of the drift before it infiltrated the system. As they sift through decades-old files, Mara discovers something chilling. Archive schematics for early infrastructure automation projects branded under a defunct authority known as the Operational Continuity Board, or OCB. She finds signatures from individuals who were supposedly removed from government service years ago, yet their names appeared in the mysterious directives she uncovered recently. It means the shadow activity is not a modern anomaly. It's a continuation of a project quietly sustained over generations. Jalen finds a roster of contributors, but half the names are blacked out, censored manually, not digitally. Whoever erased them did so long before the current conflict began. Mara realizes the drift is not an infiltration, but the unfolding of an old blueprint that has finally reached its operational phase. As Mara processes the discovery, a low rumble shakes the floor. Dust falls from the overhead pipes. Jalen kills the flashlight. They hear movement. Boots, deliberate, synchronized. Someone has tracked them to the archive facility. Mara clutches the roster she found, feeling its weight deepen with every passing second. They slip into the narrow record chute, crawling through the cramped metal corridor as voices echo from the room they just left. Not soldiers, not law enforcement. Their communication is calm, efficient, coded in a terminology Mara's never heard. These aren't Rowan's people. They aren't the mysterious system faction either. A third force, older, perhaps the original architects of the OCB. As Mara and Jalen reach the opposite end of the chute, they emerge behind a rusted compactor unit. The intruders spread out, with tactical precision, scanning the shelves. One of them speaks into a comm device, saying only, "The archivist has breached phase 0. Recover the ledger at all costs." Mara stiffens. The roster she carries isn't just evidence, it's a trigger. Jalen urges her toward an exit ladder. As they climb, she hears the intruders say something that freezes her. The system is awakening. All variables must be contained. They burst into the early morning light through a forgotten alley grate, lungs burning, hearts racing. Jalen urges Mara to run, but she stops, gripping the roster. Everything snaps into focus. Rowan's warnings, the distorted broadcast, the drone at the rail yard, the OCB records, all fragments of a larger war she has unwillingly become central to. The drift isn't just system corruption, it's the activation of a dormant architecture designed to control the nation without public oversight. Multiple factions want it. One to seize power, one to prevent collapse, and one, the original creators, to reclaim what they began decades ago. And Mara, by uncovering the roster, has shifted the balance. She realizes no one will give her the truth. Willingly, each faction has its own version of salvation. The only way forward is to expose everything, not to a single group, but to the public, a choice that would make her the most wanted person in the country. Jalen meets her eyes, waiting for her decision. She folds the roster, steps onto the street, and whispers, "We bring it into the light." As the sun breaks through the horizon, Mara understands the reality. The real conflict isn't coming. It's already here, and she may be the only one capable of stopping it.